Often all we will hear about are Trump tweets in the media. That's the only thing they seem to care about some days. And they have a point in the sense it does display how unbelievably unhinged he is, but often the discussion of tweets is at the detriment or to the detriment of policy and more substantive discussions, and it's more because he offends their sensibilities and is uncouth, which I don't really care too much about. What I do care a lot about, and the media and the rest of us should care a lot about too, is Trump's callous disregard for lives of brown people, which was perfectly exemplified today in this tweet. Big day for Israel. Congratulations, he said this morning. This is, of course, in reference to the Jerusalem embassy, which is officially opening today. The United States is moving our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But you know what else happened this morning? At least 37 Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces during clashes at the Gaza border on Monday, the largest number of fatalities suffered in one day since the latest round of protests began more than 6 weeks ago, the Palestinian Ministry of Health announced. The toll increased to 41 at the time of filming this piece. The demonstrations were taking place hours before the new U.S. embassy was due to officially open in Jerusalem. The Palestinian Health Ministry said more than 1,600 had suffered injuries and that many of the dead had not yet been identified. CNN journalists near the Gaza-Israeli border heard gunfire in spurts and saw a tank moving towards the fence in the border area of Malaka. Israeli drones also dropped tear gas over a crowd of protesters. More than 80 people have been shot and killed by Israeli soldiers since the latest wave of protests began in March, according to a CNN count based on the Palestinian Ministry of Health figures. But congratulations, Israel. They are shooting unarmed protesters in those protesters' lands. They are occupying, against international law, the territory of the Palestinians and murdering protesters that are simply walking towards their border in a peaceful protest. And this embassy move, which is deliberately trying to rub Israel's dominance over the Palestinians in the Palestinians' faces, is the only thing that Donald Trump acknowledges this morning. Not the illegality of the Israeli occupation, not the deaths of the protesters, not the apartheid state that Netanyahu and his cronies have created after decades and decades and decades of no peace, despite saying they want peace. No, congrats on the embassy with no nuance. And today, Jared Kushner, who is inexplicably still in a senior foreign policy role, despite being unable to get security clearance, spoke on Donald Trump's behalf to a crowd that included Netanyahu and another person who is maybe equally as important behind this decision to move the embassy. Let's see if you can spot him out.
The United States stands with Israel because we both believe in freedom. We stand together because we both believe in human rights. We stand together because we believe democracy is worth defending. And the United States stands with Israel because we believe, we know that it is the right thing to do.
That is Jared Kushner saying to great applause that the United States believes in human rights along with Israel hours after over 40 Palestinian protesters were killed, to a cheering Sheldon Adelson, the Trump megadonor, who is a huge part of this decision. How big of a part, you may ask? Sheldon Adelson gave $25 million to a political action committee backing Trump and $5 million to his inauguration. But Trump wasn't always pals with Sheldon. During the campaign, he said this about Adelson's relationship with Marco Rubio, who was running against Trump at the time. Sheldon Adelson is looking to give big dollars to Rubio because he feels he can mold him into his perfect little puppet. I agree. Who is Adelson's puppet now, Donald Trump? Because it looks like you. He's sitting in the audience watching your errand boy son-in-law do his bidding through you. In fact, Adelson was such a big part of Donald Trump's policy decision here that he even offered to help pay for the embassy move to Jerusalem. This is one of the biggest examples of corruption I've honestly ever seen. This is a man, Sheldon Adelson, who is a zealot, a religious zealot, who doesn't care what happens to the Palestinian people, who wants to dominate the region, determining our foreign policy as a nation directly through his campaign contributions. And yes, Jared Kushner has a cozy relationship with Netanyahu, even bragging that Netanyahu slept in his childhood bed when he was a kid. Oh, goody. But do you think Trump would bend to the will of Jared Kushner? No, no. It was the money that got him to push for this embassy change. It was because he was Adelson's puppet, is Adelson's puppet. But here's some more from Kushner.
As we have seen from the protests of the last month and even today, those provoking violence are part of the problem and not part of the solution.
So those provoking violence are a part of the problem and not a part of the solution. I agree, Jared. If you were referring to the actual provokers of violence, how can you stand there with a straight face, speaking to a smirking Lindsey Graham, by the way, and say that the protesters who were just hours ago mowed down with bullets are the ones provoking the violence? Hours before, over 40 people died. This is Orwellian, this is double speak, this is absolutely disgusting and wrong, and this is an exertion of United States foreign policy for religious reasons. We can sit on our high horse and look at the terrorism in Muslim Middle Eastern countries and say, oh wow, look how primitive, like, Bill Maher will say. We are doing the exact same thing with this. Oligarchs in our country, like Sheldon Adelson, are inserting their wacko political beliefs into our or religious beliefs into our foreign policy, and are pushing the U.S. to back a country that is overseeing bloodshed, an apartheid state. I don't say that lightly. And they stand up there and they talk of peace. Again, the Russia story is important, but all I hear is about how Russian oligarchs run the show there. They're running the show here, American oligarchs. We are throwing a lot of financial and military support behind an apartheid regime that is committing human rights abuses daily. I have a new litmus test for the next president of the United States on foreign policy. We need a president who will stand up to Israel and stop this. This must end. Our history books will look back upon us with absolute disgust if we don't end this, about our bigotry and, yes, our leadership's religious insanity.